Hey guys, and welcome to or back to the Pause in Pursuit podcast with your host, Summer Clark. So today I have probably one of my favourite ever episodes that I've recorded. It's very close to my heart basically because I am super interested in sports psychology, and today I'll be talking to Laura, and I'm not going to try and say her surname because I'll probably butcher it, but it is in the title of this podcast episode. Laura is a psychologist, and we're going to be talking about the psychology behind competitive sport. And this is something that I am super interested in because I have struggled with it in the past myself. It is still something that I'm constantly working on, being a very competitive person with a lot of emotions behind, competing in agility. It was so interesting to learn more about it, not only why people think a certain way about competing in sport and how they react to different outcomes, but also how they can help themselves and get help from others and professionals, etc., to deal with it better and move forward in a positive way. So yeah, it was an amazing episode. But before we jump into that, I will give you my weekly recap quickly. So not the best week as far as things happening to me, because I went to Iconics on Saturday. Let me start. So Friday I woke up and my foot was slightly sore and I thought that's a bit weird. But I've had things like that before, so I thought it's fine. It'll just go away by tomorrow. Got up in the morning, it was still kind of sore, but again, I was like, it's really nothing. I could barely feel it. I was more just aware of it. Anyway, did my 3 runs at Iconics, which went really well, by the way. Arrow won his first run of the day, and it was an agility. And I held him on his seesaw for literally 4 seconds, and we still won. And there was only 2 clears in the class. So yeah, I was really proud of him. And then our other agility class was so hard. I think there was 1 clear in the whole across heights or something silly. It was a really cool course though. Basically, I just tested a skill that I wasn't sure if he'd do because I haven't really practiced it. It involved a lot of working away and a lot of layering, and he just wasn't quite sure, bless him. But we know what to work on now, and I really enjoyed that course. His seesaws were phenomenal, nearly all the way to the 2-on-2 off position. Pretty much into a spot-on 4-on in that agility. Slightly high in the one he won, but again, it's not taking him long now to go down into the 2-on-2 off. So we're getting there. And then the last run was the jumping, and that was in Chris Curtin's ring. Absolutely loved this course. Got to 19 out of 20. I wasn't fast enough to get there for the round the back on 19, and he cut in front of me and took the face side. So 2 things. 1, I need to work on my sprinting, and I have joined Chris's Karma Fitness Academy lately, so I'll be working on stuff like that, exercise and workouts specifically for the agility handler, obviously alongside my current weightlifting anyway. But so that's super exciting. I'm excited to start doing that. But yeah, I basically needed to be there to send him round the back. Also, though, he could have listened to my back command. Because I did say it early enough. So obviously we need to work on him listening to my verbals instead of just my body language. So yeah, overall, really pleased with him. He's feeling so solid. He's feeling, he's just feeling really, really mature and almost consistent, and we're feeling really connected, and I'm super proud of him, and he's definitely getting faster, which is crazy to me. Never thought I'd say that, but I love it. So that was Iconics, but by the time I got home, I could not bear weight on my right foot. Hoped it'd go away, obviously, very hopeful. Monday, exactly the same. Sunday, the day after, exactly the same. So I went to A&E. They think it's metatarsalgia, which is basically inflammation in the joints that connect your toes to your foot through, you guessed it, overuse. This will be a combination of everything I do. I do too much. Lots of dog walking, obviously not only Arrow, but my clients as well now. The gym most days, weightlifting, heavy weightlifting, including heel elevated squats. So when you squat 65 kilograms basically on your toes, that's probably going to happen. So I've learnt my lesson there. And then I've been doing a lot of sprint training recently on top of agility. So it's an overuse injury again, basically. It is better today. Today's Tuesday. It's better than it was. But essentially I just have to rest it, which is super boring. But again, it's not the worst injury that you could sustain. So it's just a case of resting it and being patient, controlling the controllables, nutrition, sleep, rest, all the things. And luckily I do have lots to work on, laptop-based projects, including my online coaching business, and also getting you guys that running dog walk online course ready. So that is a work in progress, should be with you soon. And as far as online coaching goes, please do inquire if you're interested in my personalised training programs and getting one-to-one support with your dog training from me. So that's pretty much a summary of my week. Not great, but it is what it is. Shit happens, I suppose. I did have a very woe is me day on Sunday, but I'm trying to just think, well, there's nothing I can do about it now, so let's just do what we can. And that is pretty much my weekly recap. The doctor is sending me for an x-ray tomorrow, so next week you will hear all about that. Hopefully, just to rule out stress fractures, but I'm sure it's not that. He said it's very unlikely, but best to rule it out. So that's what's going on with me at the moment. Luckily, the season is pretty much over for me. I have nothing proper important until stakes now, which is end of December. So September, October, I have 3 months. It's going to be fine in 3 months, isn't it, realistically? So thank God for that. Thank God it didn't happen 2 weeks ago before stakes semis, Jesus Christ. And my next judging appointment isn't for 3 weeks, so that's good. I am teaching I'm teaching a workshop on Friday, so I'm obviously going to do that, but I can drive fine. But I'm just going to have to stand a bit more still than normal, and also, just hobble around, but we can do that. Like I said, 3 days till that, and it's a lot better already, so positive vibes only, guys, positive vibes only. And without rambling on too much, you're probably thinking, Summer, I don't care, get into the episode, or you probably skipped this already, to be fair. Let's get into the episode with Laura, all about the psychology behind competitive sport. So the first thing I always ask guests is just to quickly introduce themselves to listeners.
Yeah. So I'm with titles and everything, or
with everything. Yeah, go for it.
Okay, I'm Dr. Laura Kiemle-Gabbay. I'm a doctor of sport and exercise psychology, and I'm also currently a trainee clinical psychologist.
Amazing. Yeah, you may as well put the title in there while you've got it. You worked hard for
it. Good point.
So the first question then is, what do you think is more important in sport, physical ability or mental strength, and why?
So I think that this is one of those sort of like nature versus nurture type debates.
Exactly.
And really the best athletes will have a combination of two and access to a lot of very helpful resources.
Yes, true.
If I was going to draw on, say, like a theoretical model, if I was working professionally with someone, I'd refer to something called like the biopsychosocial model. So you're aiming to nurture somebody's sort of inbuilt biological qualities that make them an athlete at the top of their game. You want to identify and then develop their particular psychological strengths, and you have to have that social system around that person. And that can be, athlete and coach, or dog and handler, person and family, but we're talking wider stuff. I worked in women's and youth sports a lot, and they are often quite critically underfunded compared to male sport. So the wider system as well has to be there. I think looking at para athletes as well is a great example of the fact that
true.
Things can be adapted.
They can overcome everything, really, can't they?
Yeah, exactly. And if you think long jump is hard, do long jump with one leg.
It puts it into perspective, doesn't it?
Yeah, but at the same time, mental resilience can be the thing that gets an injured athlete back quickest to training.
True.
So definitely,
I have heard that before, actually. Do you think that I know it sounds strange, but do you think an athlete's mental state can physically heal an injury faster, or is it more, because I know stress can have like a physical impact on your body, but can that help with injury recovery, do you reckon, or is it all about, you know, how much effort you put into the rehab and the stuff like that?
There is some really interesting research out there that I will hold my hands up and say I've not read for a while, but I think they have done some studies on injured athletes, and the one that comes to mind, I think off the top of my head, they were injured javelin throwers, and they
Okay.
got them to do mental visualization during the injury period, but a particular type of visualization that's called PETLEP. So it's an acronym, and it stands for physical, environment, task, timing, learning, emotion, and perspective. And
Okay.
essentially, the idea is that you want to have the physical environment, the task that you're doing, the timing of that task, the emotions that you would feel, everything as close to real life as possible. So not, you know, sitting in your bed with a cup of cocoa, having a nice time and thinking about it, but being in the field, thinking everything through, mimicking the sounds of a competition. And they threw, once they were able to start throwing again, comparable to pre-injury levels. And I guess the science behind it is that your brain, your sort of neuron level, doesn't necessarily know the difference between you throwing something or thinking about throwing something if the image is of high quality.
Okay.
So
That
you're
is
still
so clever.
training that muscle at a micro level, in a way that you're not when you're just resting.
Yeah, because you're at least, you know, your brain's at least, like you say, thinking about doing it, so that when you do it, you kind of rehearse that moment. I suppose it is like people rehearsing things or training, isn't it? It is
Entirely that. Yeah. It's maintaining familiarization. And at the end of the day, the biggest thing for injured athletes is motivation.
Yes.
And keeping a foot in the door in an off season or during an injury period is one of the biggest things to motivate somebody to want to return to sport.
Yeah, and it probably means that they return sort of with more ease. You know, they don't have to do quite as much to get back into it as if they just, like you said, sat in bed and done nothing for that whole period.
Yeah, and you know, rest is important,
Oh yeah,
like as well at the same time.
it's
But I
balance,
think,
isn't it?
yeah, exactly. It's everything in sport is a balance. You know, there's always going to be somebody, to sound like Daft Punk, faster, better, stronger than you. There's always going to be somebody with access to better equipment, better coaching, better settings, better environments. I come from a competitive sport background myself. I did a lot of ski racing to a pretty high level, and
Wow.
you know, we're not in the Alps.
Yeah.
I didn't spend, you know, 6 to 9 months of the year living in the Alps. Like I had to balance. I skied in a snow dome, which is essentially a giant fridge. So I was really good for the first 15 gates of a course. And then when I was
Yeah.
abroad on a real mountain, suddenly there's 40 gates.
And that's just circumstances, isn't it?
That's
Like you
just
can't do a lot
circumstance.
about it. Yeah.
But then, you know, one of our best athletes at the minute in skiing, we've got Dave Riding, whose dad actually used to be my coach.
Ah.
He grew up in Pendle, on Pendle Hill, and he's won World Cup medals. So it goes to show, you know, sometimes you've got to push a door down, but it's about finding the doors that will open for you.
Yeah, exactly. Control the controllables, as they say.
Exactly that.
But it's funny, I think people think, you know, it's either physical ability or mental strength, but then like you said, it's also the support network around you, you know, the people that you've got around you is huge, and just your life circumstances. So there's
Yeah.
way more to it than even just those two things, I think.
Yeah, completely.
So number 2 then, do you think someone with exceptional mental strength can outperform someone with a natural gift for the sport? So that's a bit similar to the first question. So if you've got two different people, one's really good mentally and then one's just quite naturally gifted.
I think that we've got sort of a growing respect for the role of psychology and mental strength in sport. Particularly, people like to talk about resilience a lot, right?
Yes, yeah.
You know, realistically, I know in some rare cases, two people can come first, but at the end of the day, it's one person that
Yeah,
gets a gold
pretty
medal.
much.
One person stood on that first place podium.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that if if you understand your talent to be purely physical, whether that's like good looks, good genetics, good biology, or if you're honing that and training that really hard in the gym, but you're sort of leaving everything else to the side, then I think that can make failure a lot harder to deal with and setbacks harder to deal with. Because a good part, a good chunk of being like a mentally strong athlete is acceptance. Acceptance that things won't always go your way. Acceptance that people have bad days. There's also, of course, like, even for those of us where sport is a huge part of our lives, it is a part of our lives. And that means that, you know, there are so many things that can happen in life outside of sport or detract from that. And so mental strength is not just about how well you can, you know, have a really good sporting mindset, or how well you can set goals, or how well you can get yourself out of bed at 5 o'clock in the morning in the middle of winter to go and do a training session. It's also about how well you can manage the level of sporting performance that you're wanting to be at, and everything else in life. Because
and what, like, everyone's got different things going on, haven't they, in their lives as well, different responsibilities. You know, if you've got someone who's got loads of other things going on, they could probably train less than someone who's pretty much just a full-time athlete, if that makes sense. So that's
100%. You know, there's a lot of sports, it's not possible to just do that as a sport. You know, it is something that you have to fit around the career that funds you to do that. People have responsibilities, people have caring responsibilities. They might go through different periods in their life where, say, they have children or they have older parents. Different things come up at different times. That can hit in the middle of a competition season. And I do think that, you know, physical capability is always going to be time limited. But athletes with longevity in the sport tend to have really sharpened themselves mentally. So
because everyone ages, don't they? But how you cope with that, I suppose.
Yeah, I think it's about the type of athlete you want to be. You know, I've got nothing against people that want short, sharp, fiery careers and then they want to get out and do something else. But if you're in the sport, whatever it is that you're doing for, you know, the love of the sport, and you want longevity in that, it's, the mind's a muscle at the end of the day. You are going to have to work that out as hard as you work out everything else.
And I feel like that's even harder sometimes, because I feel like a lot of people don't know how to sort of work out the mind, as you say, whereas it's kind of a bit more obvious, like, you know, lifting weights in the gym and those kind of movements, whereas mentally, I think a lot of people, and I think a lot of people as well, can end up like almost tying their identity to their sport, so that if they go through a period of where they're not doing so well, or, you know, they get an injury or something and can't do the sport, they really struggle mentally with that, kind of accepting that for a while, which I know I've kind of been in that position before.
Yeah, completely. And I think this is where going through clinical training has made me think back on a lot of the work that I've done in sport with, say, people that are thinking about dropping out, or really sort of having a bit of an identity crisis, and they really feel like they're grieving a part of their life, and they're grieving a part of their identity. And I had some really, really interesting training in a type of therapy called acceptance and commitment therapy. And the person that was training me worked in oncology, specifically with people with terminal cancer diagnoses. And I remember them saying to me, you know, you shouldn't be living like you're already dead when there's still some living to do. And I think that's an attitude for sport as well. You know, you can go into sport always thinking that, you know, you're never going to be good enough, or what if you don't get it right, or really ruminating on all of the failures, but then you're basically living as if you're already dead.
You're putting yourself through something that hasn't even happened yet and might not. Like the amount of times I've gone into a big competition and, you know, there's those doubts and stuff like that, but then it's gone well. So I'm thinking, well, why did I stress so much? Because it didn't happen anyway.
Yeah. And it's often people will say, like, oh, you know, you don't remember the bad times, but I've found in my experience it's the opposite. Actually, I really remember all the times I stressed so much I made myself sick before a competition.
Oh yeah, I remember those too well. I wish I didn't.
It's the little horrible highlights reel that plays in your head of like, when you vomited on the side of that course.
Oh God. Shows how much it means to you though, I suppose.
Exactly that. You don't, I think the one thing you really don't want in any form of sport is apathy.
Mm,
Like you've got, if you care about something, it's probably going to make you anxious, because if you're not fussed about something, then losing it doesn't matter to you, you
yeah,
know?
exactly. So there's always going to be a little bit of that. Do you know what I mean? Yeah, and
Yeah,
you kind of got to accept it, like not expect it to be any different,
that's
and think of it as a
exactly
good
that.
thing. Like at least it's important and it's a big part of your life.
Yeah, and I think especially, in a sport like dog handling, like
Mm.
agility, it's not just you've got to think about. You've got your teammate.
Exactly. Well, it's 50-50,
And
isn't it?
yeah,
Yeah.
and as much as you can communicate with that, and you communicate with each other, at the end of the day, your anxiety and your stress and your self-criticism can rub off on your teammate.
Yeah.
Your dog's there
Exactly.
to enjoy itself. Your dog doesn't
Yeah.
know if it's going first, second, or third. Like
Yeah.
it
Exactly.
might pick up on the sense of the atmosphere that something fun is happening, but
Hmm.
the
And the
position is
opposite.
for you.
They
Yeah.
also pick up if you're really stressed or not in a good way. And the amount of times I've gone into a competition, something external's happened, I've not been in the best frame of mind, it always goes worse. The dog always performs worse.
Yeah.
And it's probably because they're it does rub off on them, and they can sense that, and they're like, something's wrong. Like, what's wrong? I can't really do it properly. Well, I know something's wrong with you.
Yeah. And that is life, isn't it? We all
Mm.
have days where we wish we could have performed better, and we also have events where we go, I honestly don't know how I pulled that one out of the bag, but I'm not knocking it.
Yeah. The unexpected ones are always the best, actually.
Yeah.
So what is self-talk then, and how can it help people to excel in sport?
So self-talk, I would describe it as a sort of a skill or a coping strategy that a lot of people use.
Mm.
Generally, it's sort of, positive self-talk you hear a lot,
Yeah.
sort of reassuring yourself, talking yourself through things. But self-talk can also be like a tool for rehearsal.
Mm.
Um, I myself actually discovered really not even that long ago that when people talk about mental visualization, they can actually see things in their mind. Um,
Okay.
I've got a condition called aphantasia, which means it's literally just black up there. I can't visualize anything.
Oh wow.
Um,
Okay.
and I thought that was normal. I thought we were all like that.
Ah.
But
No,
yeah, it
yeah,
turns out
like
a lot of people really
like
do
when you zone
visualize.
out and you can think about something, like that picture, it's just not
Yeah,
there.
there's no picture for
Oh
me.
wow.
So,
Okay.
but I did sort of visualize things through talking. So,
Mm.
in my sport, for example, skiing, you sort of inspect a race course from the side before you ski it. And some people will
Mm.
remember that by visually rehearsing it, but I would talk myself through.
Ah.
You're gonna have
Okay.
to come out the start gate really fast, put the edge on at this point. You've got three sort of normal control gates, and then you're gonna have to go into this and da da da.
Mm.
And that's how I personally have used self-talk. I think a part of self-talk that people don't like to talk about is negative self-talk.
Yes. And I think that's
Um,
can be very detrimental, can't it, if you get in your own head?
yeah, and I think we all have a self-critic, right? An inner self-critic, and
Yes,
that
100%.
self-critic is usually, if we're open-minded and curious about it and where it comes from,
Mm.
it's often linked to like something in our early life. Maybe it's a
Yeah.
teacher that always made you feel rubbish, or maybe it was a coach that just you didn't get on with, or your
Mm.
parents or somebody else in your family, or
Yeah,
it
there's usually a root
reminds you of
cause.
someone. Yeah, it reminds you of someone, and it criticizes you in the way that it knows how to really get to you. And I guess in
Mm.
that sense, your positive self-talk, or even just your neutral self-talk, needs to be a little bit of the antidote to
Yeah.
that.
Right.
Um, yeah, I think like if I had a tip for how it could help you excel in sport, I guess in particularly like in agility,
Mm.
speak to your dogs the same way that you'd like to be spoken to. Oh no, sorry, speak to yourself the same way you'd like to speak to your dog. You're not
Yeah,
gonna get
yeah.
very far with criticism and then enforcement, right? Compared
Yeah, yeah.
to praise and correction.
Yes, yeah.
Like if I've made a mistake, I want to be told like, hey, you did this really well. Here's where you could have developed something. But, it's
Yeah, still giving that positive side to it.
yeah, because realistically, even a poor performance, there's still things that probably went okay, or
Yeah.
things that you can learn well,
Mm.
stuff that you can pick up on and change for next time. And yeah, I think the conversation that happens, verbal and non-verbal, between dog and handler, like mirroring some of that in towards the conversation you have with yourself. If
Yeah.
you wouldn't scream at your dog when it makes a mistake and go, right, that's it, you're never doing this again, I've had enough with you. Don't
Yeah.
talk to
So
yourself
why
like
do it
that
to
either.
yourself? Yeah, no, that's very true. Yeah, and you always praise your dog. You always give your dog a reward after even a bad run. But
Yeah.
then, if it's us that's made the mistake, we don't really give that to ourselves at all. So yeah, that's a really
No.
good way to look at it. So, what is your best piece of advice then for someone struggling with severe pre-competition anxiety? So, I suppose this is like nerves before a competition, but quite
Hmm.
extreme to the point where, it's almost debilitating and it actually does quite really affect their performance.
Yeah. Preparation is key.
Mm.
It's a really normal part of human existence to be absolutely rattled by things that are unfamiliar and things that we can't control.
Yeah.
And competitions tend to be quite beyond our control,
Yeah.
and they can also be quite unfamiliar. Maybe it's in a new place, maybe
Mm-hmm.
it's an arena or a setting you've not been to.
And it's always a new course as well. So,
Always a new course, maybe there's new
mm.
competitors, maybe you've just moved out of, like, say, independent competition circuits into now sort of the regulated ones.
Mm.
And trying to mimic that and plan ahead as much as you can just means that on the day that you can almost convince yourself that it's only a little bit different to any other normal day,
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
your peak sort of arousal that you want to aim for in any kind of sporting competition is that sort of sweet spot between you're a little bit more up than normal. You're definitely not wanting to be down here, but you don't want to tip over that point into, okay, now I'm panicked and now I'm fretting. Some anxiety is normal. It's like you said, it's just a sign that you care about it.
Yeah. And sometimes you
Having a
can
good
kind of use
handle.
it as more adrenaline and, kind of an oomph. Do you get what I mean? I feel
Yeah,
like a little bit of
massively.
anxiety can be helpful, but if you let it go too far, then it just stops being helpful. You get that like dry mouth, you start like losing
Yeah.
focus and all those bad things.
There's loads of different ways that a psychologist might support somebody to understand what goes on in their body when they're
Mm.
anxious. You could draw on, like, cognitive behavioral therapy and help a
Mm.
person understand what it is that they're thinking. Like, if I could listen to your mind like a radio, what would I be hearing?
Mm.
What emotions those thoughts link with, how that feels in the body. You mentioned dry mouth, sweaty hands, shaky
Yeah.
legs, and then what actions you do or what behaviors you do. And you can start seeing these links here and go, oh God, well, when I tell myself I'm rubbish and I'm going to do really bad, then my knees get wobbly. And then I focus on my knees and then I think, right, I'm going to have to sit down. And then I get stressed that I'm sitting down. I think I should be doing something else. And then I feel guilty. And then that guilt motivates me
Yeah.
to do.
It's a chain.
Yeah, it's a chain reaction, and it's about knowing your particular patterns. And another good way of looking at things is when we're really threatened,
Mm.
that can be like, I know that a sport competition is not a woolly mammoth coming towards me,
Yes.
but
Yeah.
our brains haven't really evolved that much from, oh my God,
Mm.
there's a woolly mammoth running towards
Yeah. It
me.
just thinks of it as a threat.
It's a huge threat, and when our threat system's really, really elevated,
Mm.
it reduces our drive system, our get up and go, and our soothe system. So you can end up quite frozen. You've
Mm.
not got enough oomph to do something, and you're also not really able to recover. But once the threat is there, you can't really shrink the threat. So
yeah, it's too late.
you need to grow the drive and grow the soothe so that then your threat seems a bit more in proportion to everything else.
Yeah,
Because
perspective again, isn't it?
yeah, it's exactly that. And you know, different people will have different ways that they like to do that. I always say to athletes that I've worked with, your pre-competition preparation does not start the morning of your competition. It starts several weeks before.
Yes, yeah, no,
You
exactly.
know, where do I need to be by this point? Where do I need to be 3 days in advance? Where do I need to be on the day? I've worked with athletes who's really just really struggled with the competition environment being so different. And we used to do, you know, it sounds a bit silly, but like we'd play crowd noise at training.
Oh, yeah, no, that's a good idea. Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you're going there and you're not suddenly like really overwhelmed by all this massive environment, sensory experience. You've been
Yeah.
listening to people shouting for ages, you know,
Yeah,
and planning for the worst case scenario in a safe way. I don't mean like let's snowball and have all of our worst thoughts and ideas, but if knowing your plan B is fine, but sometimes you need a plan C, a plan D, oh my gosh, now I'm on plan G.
so many backups that you can't almost go wrong in a sense.
Yeah, or so many backups so that when something happens, which it inevitably often will do,
Yes.
it's less rattling. You know, it's not like the whole floor slides out from underneath.
Yeah, you keep your head.
Okay, yeah, exactly. I have sort of prepared for this. Is always better than, oh my, what on earth is happening?
Yeah, definitely. And I think a lot of the time as well, because I don't know how much agility you've, you know, seen before, but we all have to walk the course before we run the dog over it. And I love to have at least 3-4 plans, because the dog can turn the wrong direction and then you need your plan B. Or do you know what I mean? And you have to really have that. And I think that there, like literally in the moment before you step into the ring, kind of gives you a bit more confidence.
Completely. And it's a really similar tactic actually. So it's really interesting to hear that you that's how your mind works in these environments. As to I used to work a lot with like freestyle ski and snowboard athletes. So they have to have all of these what we would call contingency plans, because say if you're doing, I don't know, something really simple, like I say really simple. You're planning on doing a 540 rotation. So you're going to do a full spin and then a half spin. So you're going to end up backwards.
Okay. Yes. Okay.
But you don't. You only get 360 round, and now all of a sudden you're facing forwards.
Yeah.
So I can't now do my backwards somersault. I'm going to have to do something else.
Do something else. So you hope you plan for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or your contingency planning.
And then judges won't even know that you didn't mean to do that in the first place.
Exactly.
That's so true.
Exactly.
So what is your best piece of advice for someone who is highly self-critical after experiencing quote unquote failure then?
So I would encourage this person to be curious about what failure is.
Yeah.
You know,
I suppose it's defining it, isn't it? And that's individual.
Yeah. You can get so hung up on not seeing the, you know, the woods for the trees, if that's the phrase, like, oh God, this is terrible. And now I failed at this. And then that's going to mean that this happens. Now you're trapped in a cycle. And actually, that's usually not real.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just in your head.
Yeah, like if you've just had a competition and it's gone terribly, and I went like, show me on a pie chart how much of a failure you feel now, most people will be hovering around the 100%.
Oh yeah, at least.
But if I go, okay, but what have you done today that didn't make you feel like a failure? You know, have you made good connections with people? Were there parts of that routine that went in the way that you wanted it to? Did you gain some new experience here? Did you manage a little bit of a hiccup, but you just didn't recover from the bigger one? Like, what's that pie chart looking like now?
And even in a run that I come out and think was the worst thing ever, I always get someone to film my run. So then I watch it back an hour later when I've sorted myself out, and it's never as bad as it feels in the moment. And there's always at least one good section, always.
Video feedback is so crucial. And I think at training and at competition, you know, if you have access to a camera and somebody who's prepared to film it for you, use it, because
always.
It's scary seeing yourself on tape. Nobody likes it. It's
You get used to it though.
uncomfortable, but you do get
Yeah.
used to it. And I think especially like, with self-criticism, it can be a bit of a false binary. Like you either have to love yourself or you are the worst. You either have succeeded or you have failed.
Yeah,
And
black and white.
yeah, like if that's how your coach worked, right? If you had a coach that basically said, if you're not first place, I'm not interested. You're
Yeah.
at training and you only hear what you're getting wrong.
Yeah.
You watch your video feedback and it's, what was this? What were you thinking there? Chances are you're going to be looking for a new coach, right?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah, no one's gonna like that.
no one's going to like that. Spite can be a powerful motivator in the short term.
But not all the time.
Not all the time. You're going to burn out. So if you wouldn't accept that from a coach, be curious about why you'd accept it in yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, a bit like the dog situation where, be as nice to yourself as you are to the dog.
Yeah.
Treat yourself like you're your own coach almost.
And I think self-compassion's really, really lacking in especially like elite sport. There is this idea that you just have to be tough, you just have to be resilient. But actually, I think compassion and empathy are beautiful qualities about what it means to be human anyway. And in a world that can be quite unforgiving and often quite hostile, like elite sport, it's really important to hold on to that and hold on to that compassion, because otherwise you can sometimes forget why you got into the sport in the first place. And if we're talking about long careers, like we need those long-term motivators.
And most people didn't even get into agility to win competitions. Like you get into it, like I got into it just because I wanted to train my dog when I was little. Do you get what I mean?
Yeah.
And then, so to think that you'd even consider, maybe quitting or whatever because of a competition is kind of sad if you think about it. So again, it's just reminding yourself of these things, isn't it?
And I always think, put yourself in the dog's shoes. If you're at a competition and you see somebody absolutely berating their dog who's not really sure what they've done wrong, at the end of the day, they were just trying to please. They were just trying to get things right. Yeah, okay, they've made a bit of a mistake, but they're sort of not really sure what to do. Tail's almost going to wag, but
they have no idea what's going on, do they?
Yeah, you'd feel awful watching that, and you'd probably want to step in and be like, hang on, this is not how you should be working here.
Yeah. And they'd probably get kicked out of the show if they were being too mean. So
yeah, exactly. So you've got to really think about, well, if this is how I treat my teammate and this is how I get the performance out of them, at the end of the day, I am my own coach a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. No, that's so true. So this is quite a hard one, but do you think it is possible to excel in sport during a period of poor mental health? So from this question, I kind of got, if someone's going through a rough patch in other aspects of their life that's really affecting them day to day, but they're also involved in a sport, is it possible to still excel at that point? Or, do you kind of need to address the root cause, give yourself a bit of time out? It's probably person to person, but
yeah, I think it's one of these questions where it depends on the person, it depends on the problem. And so for that reason, I would say a cautious yes, but it depends on lots of factors. So for example, is the sport, the training, the competition providing a distraction from what it is that you have put on?
Yes, true.
In which case, maybe you're going through a really difficult relationship breakup and your home doesn't feel very nice and welcoming anymore. And actually, sometimes the only bit of time that you get for yourself is when you're out in the field training, and you can just leave that behind and you can really focus on something else. Absolutely. I think it is possible to excel in sport.
Yeah.
But then what is that person's outlet for processing their distress? Because distraction, again, it's a great short-term strategy. And it can be really effective, but it's part of a battle. It's not the whole way.
Yeah.
I also think that there are some, what I would call, I guess, like critical points where things can tip. So, when somebody's level of psychological distress tips from what we would call like from a subclinical level to a clinical level, actually, to be honest, a decent sports psychologist who's, properly trained and regulated and has an accredited qualification would not be working with somebody who is experiencing clinical levels of psychological distress. That would be for a clinical psychologist.
Yeah, it's a deeper issue.
Exactly, it's a deeper issue. And I think you really run the risk of pushing yourself so far that you end up burning out. Sometimes the kindest thing to do is to pause, really check in with yourself, remind yourself why you got into the sport in the first place, what you want to get out of the sport, and what you will gain or miss out on by continuing or by not continuing. Is that a long-term permanent thing, or is it a temporary thing?
Pros and cons again.
Yeah, pretty much. Because if you're not thinking about how you're going to manage burnout and you're really hoping that you're just going to get through, just keep getting through, like, it will come back to bite you,
Yeah, it catches up.
Yeah, I say it a lot of the time in therapy, to therapy clients that I'm working with in the NHS, like, minds are like wardrobes, and we all just tend to like shove stuff in there and then shove the doors closed and hope it's not going to burst out.
Think it'll go away on its own.
Think it'll go away. And then, you're sitting in your bedroom and, whoa, here's that dress from 5 years ago that you thought you'd buried, and oh God,
it overflows.
Shoes. And yeah, exactly. And what you really need to do in those situations is take every item out, have a little bit of a look at it, and decide where that goes back and put it back properly.
Yeah. No, it's a very good way of putting it. So would you recommend therapy or counselling for those participating in high-level sport then?
I mean, I'm a little bit biased.
Yeah, you'd hope so at this point, I guess.
Yeah, I think sports psychology in particular is crucial for anybody participating in sport, and a lot of the work that I did in sports psychology, as I said, it wasn't in like the top upper echelons of sports. My sort of moral stance was that yes, sports psychology is a luxury. And it is a luxury. It's not available for everybody, but I wanted in particular to make it more accessible for people who otherwise wouldn't receive it. And that often meant, if I'm honest, I worked for free for a long time. I worked multiple side jobs in order to pay my bills and make ends meet. That wasn't really, it's not super sustainable, but I think that people can be excellent at being their own therapists.
True.
But even therapists tend to have therapists sometimes.
Yes, very true. Yeah, therapists are people too.
Yeah, therapists are people too. I think therapy and counselling, therapy is not for everyone. Some people, it's just not their thing. I think if there are parts of yourself that you're unsure about or that you want to work on, and you're trying to sort of keep paddling and keep going in that really choppy water of elite sport, whatever sport it is that you're doing, you may benefit from having a little bit of therapeutic work on the side. If it's performance focused with some bits of well-being, I think having access to a decent sports psychologist can be really helpful. But yeah, it's a personal choice, and it's a personal journey. And to be honest, some people might not want to be unpacking childhood trauma in the midst of a competition season. So
yeah, very true. Depends how deep they want to go, I guess. And also how, like, what their issues are, because everyone's like, mentally, there's loads of different issues people may face in sport on the mental side. Like, it's just not one problem, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And I've lost count of the number of times that I would sort of start some sports psychology work with someone, and it was like, oh, like, I'm having a bit of a rough time, like, I'm just a bit anxious at the minute, and I've not had a personal best in ages, and I just really want a bit of performance stuff. And then you get to meet them and they'd be like, yeah, I'm going through a divorce. I was like, well,
yeah, and you're like, oh, there it is.
Yeah, and this divorce actually reminds me of my childhood, when I saw my parents screaming at each other all the time, and it's all I can think about at training. And it's like, okay, well, I can see how this is influencing, your performance.
It all makes sense.
The question is do you want to what do you want to do? Do you want to focus on the impact within the sport, what's happening in the sport itself, and work around that? Or do you want to, go back and think about those early childhood experiences and have more of that sort of therapeutic counseling approach? And are you feasibly at a point in your life where you're able to do that?
Yeah, true. Everyone's different. And as well,
Yeah.
I bet, it could take some people a few different, therapists or professionals to find one that actually suits you, if that makes sense. Because again, everyone's got a slightly different approach.
Yeah, and different therapists work in different ways. And of course, like if you're accessing therapy on the NHS, the sort of choice in therapist and their particular approach to therapy might not really be within your control in the same way as if you're going privately. But then accessing therapy for years privately is a financial commitment that not everybody can make, understandably. And I think I think actually that if people are interested in sports psychology and they're not sure about it, then get in touch with sports psychology training programs at universities, because trainees are always looking for experience. They're new, they're fresh out the box, they're interested, they're curious, they're open-minded, and it can be a really valuable experience to grow together with someone.
Yeah, no, that's true. Yeah, maybe make a new friend out of it as well. So what are the most effective psychological techniques for someone wanting to improve their sporting performance then? And I know there's probably a lot of these.
Yeah, I reckon if you lined 10 sports psychologists up, we'd give you 100 different techniques.
Yeah.
But I guess I can run you through some of a big chunk of what I used to do when I was working in sort of the higher levels of sport is, yes, I would provide that sort of one-to-one therapeutic style support for people that were going through mental health difficulties. Yes, I would provide individual, tailored, targeted psychological interventions for people with performance issues. But I also would run a lot of psychoeducation in a way that hopefully didn't feel like school, but at the same time imparted that knowledge, because the goal of any therapist, sports psychologist, clinical psychologist, or probably other forms of psychologists as well, is it's a bit like teaching somebody how to drive. Ultimately, the goal is for them to drive themselves in there. Right?
Yeah, I suppose that's a bit similar to like you get your PTs in the gym and stuff. Do you know what I mean? That you pay a lot of money for, but the goal is eventually that you have the knowledge to go in by yourself.
Yeah, it's a really bad financial model for the clinician, because you're essentially trying to work to make yourself redundant. And I think if you're working with somebody and it's been years and is that ethical? But
why is it not working?
Really what we're trying to get anybody is a bag of tricks, right? Their toolkit, their things that they can pull out. And for somebody that might be that positive self-talk or neutral self-talk. For some people, visualization is massive. Not for somebody like me that can't see anything. But that's okay. I don't need that toolkit, or that technique in my toolkit. Mindfulness, grounding, sort of emotional regulation skills, I think they're a really, really universally important part. But then it's, I guess, about knowing yourself really well. And so this is where sort of like a bit of internal investigation. Who am I? What are my values? What are my motivations? What behavior do I do that pulls me more in line with my values and doesn't take me away from that? How do I like to be communicated to, and how do I communicate to others? Massively important in any form of team sport, or for example agility or equestrian, where your teammate is shall we say non-verbal, but still communicates with you. How do I get on the same page as everybody else I need to sort of like have in my circle? And one of the things that I always thought was really interesting when I worked with teams is that we'd ask people what they thought each other's job roles were.
Oh, okay.
And it was really interesting how
Were they
poorly
completely
people
wrong?
understood, what other people were
Ah,
there to do. And it caused such big breakdowns in team culture and team motivation.
yeah.
And you're like, well, of course you think that this person's not got your best interest at heart because they think they're doing a completely different job to the one that you think that they're doing.
Yeah. So they're doing it right in their head, but to you, it looks like they're doing it wrong.
Yeah,
Mm,
completely, so that having those sorts of conversations, being brave to have those sorts of conversations.
yeah. Yeah, because
Goal
it's a bit
setting.
uncomfortable for a lot of people, isn't it? But I feel like it's worth it.
Yeah, oh yeah, massively. Try like without being rude and without being, you know, aggressive or angry for the sake of it, like transparency and honesty is always
Yeah.
going to serve you right.
Mm,
Time is precious in elite sport, and getting to the point quickly, in a language that everybody understands is really crucial. And I think applying that to yourself, like, what
yeah.
do I need in this moment? How can I get there?
Hmm.
A to B. Is it that I'm actually really anxious, and what I really need to do at this point in time is ground myself, connect to the present moment, maybe do some rhythmic breathing. So I bring my parasympathetic nervous
Mm,
system online, and then I can start thinking about visualizing the course and planning my this
yeah.
and that and the other. Or, is it that actually I've lost my motivation and I
Mm,
really need to sort of give myself a bit of a kick up the bum, remind myself why I'm here, reach out to that support system? Is it that you're doing sort of like higher order stuff and it's just not quite fitting right for you, but you don't know your own particular learning style? Are you like sort
mm,
of jumping at the deep end and figure it out? Or do you want to watch somebody first or read a
yeah.
book about it and then try it? Do you want
Mm,
guided discovery? Do you want to be shown?
yeah. It's understanding yourself.
Yeah, if you don't know your own preferences, you're always going to be trying to fit in a one size fits all mold when it comes to
Yeah. Which is
psychology,
pretty much impossible
which
because
is
no
pretty
one's
much
one
impossible.
size, are they? So.
No.
And as far as like the mindfulness goes and stuff like that, and being really aware of, emotions and stuff, I think a lot of people struggle with that, me included sometimes, when you're kind of a bit of a go kind of person, and you've just got to like stop and slow down, which a lot of people find hard, if that makes sense. And I think
Yeah,
you can
yeah.
end up brushing over issues or emotions by doing that.
Completely. It's like I think a lot of people think that mindfulness is just sort of like chilling out and like relaxing, and
Mm,
actually like that's meditation.
yeah,
Um Mindfulness
it's
is about like
awareness, isn't it?
it's awareness, yeah, it's
Mm,
noticing, and especially actually like thinking, I guess, about the anxiety from before. A lot of people, myself included, even sometimes can't tell the difference between a thought and a feeling, right? You'll say to
yes,
somebody,
yeah.
like, what are you feeling? And they'll go, oh, I'm feeling really guilty and I'm thinking about this and that and the other, and da 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 da. A feeling's one word, an
Mm,
emotion's happy, sad, angry, frustrated, um, jealous, envious, those sorts of things.
yeah.
Thoughts can be words, they can be images, they can be memories, they can be all sorts of private experiences, urges, desires,
Mm,
and that can feel really consuming. If you're thinking, I'm not good enough, and then you're feeling, depressed,
mm.
it's so overwhelming, right? But there's so much power in going, oh, I noticed that I'm feeling like I'm not good enough.
Yeah,
I
instead of
noticed
saying you're not
that.
good enough.
Yeah, I noticed that I am having the thought that I'm not good enough.
Yeah.
That's two layers of
Mm,
separation between you and that thought. And now I've got a little bit of psychological safety to explore, oh, I wonder where that's come from.
mm.
And not try and push that thought away. Because I don't know about you, but if I say to you, let's not think about chocolate ice cream for the next 5 minutes. Like, let's not think about all the times you've eaten chocolate ice cream, all the holidays that you've had it on. Do you have it in a cone? Do you have it in a box? All
Yeah.
you're going to think about is chocolate
Is
ice
that,
cream.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's
If
so
you're trying
true.
to shove something out of your head, it's going to come back.
Yeah.
And at the same time, if you're trying to cling on to something, it probably will start to fade. So
Yeah. No,
just
exactly.
tuning into that, noticing what is going on for you in the
Mm,
moment, and noticing what you need at that point in time.
yeah.
It's how you respond to your dog, right?
Yeah. And remember it as well that, thoughts aren't facts, but they feel like it.
Yeah,
So I think
massively,
that's a big one. It's that
massively.
separation, isn't it? So back to visualization then. Do you believe in the power of visualization in achieving your desired outcome in sport? Well, we've discovered that you don't do this yourself. So I suppose that's quite difficult to say, but
well, I mean, yeah, so I can't visualize myself personally, right? Because I have this aphantasia condition, but I have never not discussed mental visualization with an athlete that I've been working with, because I think there's always workarounds. So I, for example, can't like imagine a beach and then imagine a crab and then make the crab do a little dance. But if I draw it, I can just about sometimes, maybe not always see it, but think about what it is that I've seen. So I can
you know what it is at least.
Yeah, exactly. So there are workarounds. And I would say if somebody is working with a sports psychologist and they've just now realized, like the same rushing realization I had, which is, oh my gosh, there are other people out there in the world that can't see anything in their brain. Ask your sports psychologist or ask your coach to make adaptations, because it's out there, it's in the research, it is possible. Visualization can be incredibly effective, but it's about how you're doing it and why you're doing it, you know? If your intention of visualization is to bring your emotional arousal level down and engage in relaxation, and you are doing more of that sort of meditative, calm space, compassionate space, probably not something you want to be doing 30 seconds before you're about to do it, your competition.
Yeah, definitely.
But maybe something that for a lot of youth athletes, they really wanted to do in the car ride home, instead of parents going, so well, how do you think this went?
Yeah,
down, and then I can start having this conversation and it won't feel as threatening.
Yes, yeah. Could you do it as well? Obviously, like traveling to events, I suppose you could do it.
Yeah, the car journey to and from events can be pretty make or break. And I think that often starts from, for a lot of people, that starts from if they've been playing that sport since they were a kid, because it's who's driving you there. They've got a vested interest in how you're going to do. They're interested in how it went. Some people, their first coaches are that person that drives them to the event, whether that's parent, guardian, older sibling, family friend. And I think that gets even harder when you're an adult and you have to drive yourself there. And
because you're alone with your thoughts, aren't you? Like on the way home, it's like debrief, and on the way there, it's pretty much just anxiety, isn't it? You're on your own.
Yeah, and this is where I think actually preparation and putting that work in before, so you're not just relying on that car journey there, is really crucial. So I'll bring up the reference, because I mean, I'm biased. This is how I always did PETLEP, but it's called PETLEP, and it's PETTLEP, and it's a specific model of mental visualization. It's by the people that made it are called Holmes and Collins, and they wrote their paper in 2001. So just if anybody wants to Google, that's where you'd go to. And this is actually what I, when I was working with Pat informally, is the director I pointed her in. And essentially, you're just trying to replicate real life as much as possible, because then you're sort of doing that tricking of your brain into, oh, I've been here before. Oh, I know what that's
not
like.
Scary.
And it does have some really solid, supportive evidence in the literature. Off the top of my head, I think there are a couple of studies where, for example, they've compared groups of people who are learning a new skill. I think they've done some in gymnastics. So it was like make a particular move on the beam that was new to everybody. And one group physically practiced it. And the other group got on the beam in their leotard, ready to go, same training environment, but they just never actually did it. They just rehearsed it in their mind.
Interesting. Okay.
And at the end, they could all do it.
Oh, wow. So it's literally as powerful as physically doing it almost.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
It really can
be.
If
you do it right.
If you do it right. And, this is where the adaptations are crucial. So for me, I'm not necessarily going to be able to conjure up an image, but if I'm doing loads and loads of video feedback, I might be able to maintain memories of that video feedback, or remember what I was saying to myself at the time, and get that auditory or physical felt sensations,
Yeah. I mean, in agility, because every course is different, often, you can't physically visualize a course until you've walked it, which is usually not that long until you actually compete. So I suppose in that sense, you're going to have to do it a bit more last minute. But I suppose if that's your sport, then you just get used to it anyway.
Yeah, and I suppose like whilst you might not be able to get something 100% exactly how it's going to be, you can visualize the particular arena that you're going to. You can visualize how big or how small the crowd might be.
Yeah,
If you have particular sort of, I'm not knocking superstition. Like superstition can be and rituals can be a huge part of people's preparation strategies. If you always put your left shoe on before your right shoe on a competition day, you should be doing that weeks in advance, and you should be thinking about doing that when you're visualizing your competition day.
Yeah, no, that's true. Yeah, it's all, if you do something that makes you feel more confident, what's the problem with it? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I used to carry a bit of twig round in my race suit, and I'd really panic if I didn't have one. I remember sometimes my dad, like forcing my dad to go off and find me a bit of twig, so that if I ever thought something bad, I could touch some wood.
My mum has a wooden key ring for that reason. So it's always with her. She doesn't even do sport, just in life. So what is your best piece of advice for someone wanting to improve their self-belief and confidence in sport then? Because pretty much, like, if I go in more confident, I usually do better and I enjoy it more. But sometimes you're just not feeling it. You're not feeling confident. You don't think you can do it. Or you walk a course and there's a skill that you think, oh, I can't do that. I'm not going to make it. I'm not fast enough. I'm not going to beat my dog there. When you actually can. Like, I actually can physically do it, but it's just that in your head.
I think those moments are where you have to really tune into what your values are. Is your value ambition, and not anything outside of success is therefore considered a failure? Or is your value sort of community? And actually what agility has opened up for you is a world and a community and acceptance and exercise and all these other things. And can you gain some confidence from the fact that you will, regardless of the outcome, which is a really small part of what it is to be sport, you can gain and learn from the process?
Yeah.
I think, it was something that I used to find a lot with like youth athletes when I was working a lot in like youth sport and development sport, is that like they were all so focused on what's coming next. But
the outcome, obsessing over that.
Yeah, that's such a small part. If you think about preparing for a competition, you're starting weeks, if not months in advance. Your dog is starting weeks, if not months in advance.
Yeah.
And all of that just for the sort of like, looking at the time or looking at the scoreboard or hearing judges' feedback. That's a blip in your day.
And then it's over anyway.
Exactly. And then you're on to the next competition.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I mean. And often I try and think, kind of trying to detach from that outcome a little bit of each run. Because we have like 4 runs a day, for example. So what's really important is if the first one goes wrong, you have to just forget it. Otherwise, you're going to carry that into the next one because it's all on the same day.
Yeah.
So that's really important as well.
It's the time and the place, like I absolutely at some point you need to have a bit of a debrief and think about what you're doing, but you're probably not sufficiently resourced to do that immediately after every run, because if you've had a rough run, you're just setting yourself up for a bit of failure, really, aren't you? Going, what's the point? You've already ruined it. And that's I remember I went about 2 years in my life where I actually just didn't finish a ski race. If there was trees on the side, I just somehow always ended up crashing out and I was in the woods.
Oh, wow. Okay.
If I ever saw trees on the side of a race course, I was like, right,
you'd assume
that's me gonna crash. And the single biggest thing that made a difference for me was a bit of it was a bit of a telling off, actually, I got from a coach at the time, and he said, Laura, I'd rather that you crashed fast than finished slow, because at least you'll learn something from that experience.
Yeah, true.
And he was right. I crashed fast, and eventually my mind caught up with my body and I got used to the speed, and then all of a sudden I started finishing fast.
Yeah, yeah. And that's the same as agility. Like if there's certain skills on the course that you are less confident at, you walk the course thinking, oh, this is the bit where I'm gonna get eliminated. And then you often do. But then, if I go in and I've kind of almost pretend there isn't an outcome, like as if you're in training, for example, and that you just go for it in training because you need to learn it. Do you know what I mean? Instead of thinking it's gonna catch you out, and it's fine.
Yeah, and if you think about it in training, unless you are really trying to mimic a competition performance deliberately, in training you tend to be training about 60 to 80%.
Yeah.
So you're going for it, but you're not going for it.
Yeah, not all in.
Yeah, and sometimes it's the people doing a really solid 85 that win a competition.
Yeah, true. As long as they're consistent.
Yeah, and you know what? Like, people don't really like me saying this, but I think it's true. In elite sport, no matter what sport it is, a huge amount of what makes somebody successful is skill. There is always luck involved as well.
Oh, 100%. Always. Yeah.
And you cannot control that.
Yeah, exactly. So true. It's like once I remember I was competing and someone's child was outside of the ring throwing a toy around, and it spooked my dog and threw her off, and she went wrong. And I'm thinking, that's just bad timing. Like, there's nothing to do with the skill of me or the dog. Do you know what I mean?
I had one of the best race results of my life when I was going down sort of like just outside the top 10, and it was seeded. So, I had the 10 best people in that whole region of France, really, wherever it was that I was competing, like people that had grown up in the mountains, ready to go. And it was a blizzard for the first 15 minutes.
God, yeah.
They had no visibility. Half of them crashed out. I think at one point, actually, somebody broke a leg and we had to wait for a helicopter. And then I had lovely, perfect visibility, and I was just excited not to break my leg. And it was honestly one of the best competitions of my life.
Yeah. Same for agility. Sometimes it chucks it down and it's just, that's what it is. The equipment's slippy, or half of the class that you're competing against had it in the dry, and then the other half have it in the slippy ground. So do you know what I mean? There's always stuff like that.
It's controlling the controllables. And one thing that you don't have necessarily huge control over anxiety, but you do have control over how you respond to it.
Yeah, exactly. Trying to remember that it's all a choice. So what is your best piece of advice for someone wanting to improve their focus and not allow external noise to affect their sporting performance? So by external noise, I took this as kind of, other people's opinions, or, telling you, oh, be careful of this, or do it like this because of this, or, other things going on that can kind of distract you.
I'm going to assume that for most people competing in dog agility, the person who knows their dog best is themselves.
Absolutely.
Right. So then I would say go in with the motto that that's probably true for yourself as well.
Yeah.
The relationship
again.
Yeah, relationship between dog and handler, really similar in like equestrian. I would also argue it's the same in any like human and human based team sports. You're gonna know each other better than anybody else. You're also gonna know yourself better than anyone else, because even the best coach, even the best psychologist, they're not a mind reader. Like I would love to shrink myself so small I could just crawl into somebody's ear and listen to their thoughts, but that's not how it works.
Yeah,
I come with all my biases and my assumptions and my previous experiences, and I interpret somebody else's experience, but I don't get to live it for them or with them.
Yeah. The only person that knows is the person.
Yeah, exactly. A good psychologist can contribute to somebody doing well. A good coach can contribute to somebody doing well, but we didn't win that competition. We're behind the camera, and I think having the confidence, even if you are feeling unconfident, to go, well, progress is non-linear, right? Self-confidence is a bit of a journey. And how many of us come out the womb just like, I'm the best. I'm never going to have a doubt about myself in my life. This is how life goes. We all have little bumps and wobbles and little dips. And
Yeah, that's normal.
Yeah, really on a purely, I guess, like skills-based, tangible, tactical level, control what you can control and try
Mm,
not to sweat the stuff that you can't control, because that is always going to be there as background noise.
yeah. And I think it's about, kind of taking advice or other people's opinions, like taking it, but with a pinch of salt and still putting your own, thoughts and
Yeah.
feelings before that. So
Take it and
kind of
tweak it.
brushing, yeah, exactly. That's it. Like taking it into consideration, but not as fact.
Yeah.
Mm.
Usain Bolt's coach is not a faster sprinter than he is.
Mm.
No
Yeah,
coach, usually at the top of the game, is a better
it's
athlete
better
than the
than the
athletes they're
athlete.
coaching, but they
Yeah,
are good at coaching.
yeah,
Now, your mate's granddad's neighbor who says, "Oh, I knew somebody that did dog agility once, and here's what they
mm.
did, and you should do that," is even less of an
Yeah.
authority on what
That's
you
so
should be
true.
doing.
Exactly. It all comes back down to confidence. If you trust yourself, then it's not going to phase you as much as it.
Yeah.
So, this is quite general. What is your best piece of advice for someone struggling to cope with the mental demands of competitive sport? And I kind of feel like most people that compete in a sport go through at least a phase of kind of finding it a bit difficult to cope with, especially when you do get to that top level.
Yeah, I think it's about knowing what those demands are. So I
Mm,
guess like identifying them and labeling them, but then I guess at that point you have to sort of like rank and prioritize.
yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
is your priority your low self-confidence and you think that that's what's pulling you down the most, then
Mm,
that's what you're going to have to work on first. You may also, I guess, have to start really having an honest conversation with yourself and the people around you in your life about the sacrifices that you're going to have to make.
mm,
If you can't cope with demands, you may have to adjust. It
yeah.
may be that, some people end up being a specialist and not a generalist, and you can't do
Mm,
all the competitions, but you can do specialize in these ones, or that you might only travel within a certain amount of distance, but you're not going to go all the way up to the top north of
yeah.
Scotland and the bottom south of the country, because the added turmoil and cost, emotional cost, physical
Mm,
cost, financial cost is too much and you're not enjoying it anymore.
yeah. So it's again
Um,
all relative to the individual. Like it's a fine line between,
yeah,
pushing yourself a little bit and also, not being silly and ruining it for
it's
yourself.
the term you use in psychology is like the zone of proximal development. So the most amount of growth happens when somebody's not in their comfort zone. This is nice and easy for me, but they're not in the oh my god, you throw me in the deep end and I don't know how to swim. It's
Yeah.
in where they are out of their comfort zone. They're pushed. They're doing something new, but there's the right support in place internally and externally
Mm,
that can be a bit of a guiding force, right?
yeah.
Um, I think, I guess, best piece of advice for someone struggling to cope with the mental demands of competitive sport, like absolute like headline, control the controllables, leave the uncontrollables, and familiarization and planning is key. It doesn't
Mm,
matter what the sport is. If you are going to a competition, a level of competition that you've never been to before, say, you've been doing the independent circuit for a while, you've been doing just for fun, and now you think, I'm going to start taking this more seriously.
mm,
Go and spectate,
yeah.
get to
Yeah. Do
know
it
it,
at a smaller level.
get to know the environment, watch, get a
Mm,
feel for it, take your dog along to get a feel for it. If
yeah.
you're doing something for the first time on a competition day when it means so much to you and you've got 50 things that you're doing for the first time, you're going to
Setting
be
yourself
so
up to fail
overwhelmed.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, you're probably not going to take anything in. And when somebody goes,
Yeah.
how was it? You're going to go, I don't know, man, it was just a blur.
Yeah. And you're not going to learn from it. And
Yeah.
also a pre-run and like post-run routine helps me. So like a ritual I do with my dog that involves like warming up and cooling down and stuff like that is the same every single time. And it kind of
Yeah.
helps get you into a zone and remind you that you've done it before and it's exactly the same. And you're ready
Yeah.
to actually, step onto the start line.
And there's different ways, I guess, of coping. Like, I guess,
Mm,
talking in really broad terms here, coping strategies, um, depending on your school of thought, can either be trait based, so they're sort of like inherent, that is how
mm,
I cope, or they can be state based. So in this
mm,
situation, I might need to draw on this coping strategy, but in this situation, I might need to do this. I guess to draw on my sport, I would generally sort of cope in a very solution focused way. Like,
Yeah.
what's the issue? How do I solve it? But when there's a blizzard and I'm cold and I'm tired and I'm stressed, I can't really solve those problems.
That's
So what
true.
I then need at that point in time is emotional coping.
Yeah.
And avoidance coping has its place. Like
Okay.
that, I'm not going to debrief this right now, but I will check in with myself a little bit later when
Yeah.
I'm more able to do this. And
Yeah.
that's
You need to give yourself some
stress
time.
levels have come down. Yeah.
And the worst thing people can do as well, isn't it? Like, as soon as you've had, say, your competition or your run, and they're just trying to be helpful, or say, this is what went wrong. You did this. That's why, obviously, don't blame the dog. You did this or whatever. Worst time to say it. It's like, give me an hour and then I'll watch the video and I'll figure it out for myself and I'll be in a better headspace to actually take that, if that makes sense.
100%. There's a big movement, and I think they are working on it to stop interviewing athletes the second they finish their competition in the Olympics.
Awful.
Like not going straight into the press room.
Yeah. Good, because that's the worst.
Yeah, and they'll people will cry and they're not ready to answer questions. And if you think, I guess sort of like imagine yourself in that situation. Do you want to be feeling as if you've got 100 eyes on you and cameras and flashing lights?
No way.
Do you want to just go, I'm just going to avoid this for a little bit, do what I need to do, and then when I'm good and ready, I'll come back.
Yeah, definitely. So goal setting then, what do you think the benefits of that are?
Oh, goal setting's massive. Again, it's a bit like the visualization. It's got to be the right kind of goal setting.
Yeah, not just like willy-nilly, write it down and forget it.
No, there's two sort of big schools of thought about goal setting in sports psychology. SMART goals, so your specific, measurable, achievable, relevant and time-based, meaning specifically what do you want to do? How will you measure what it is that you're doing to achieve your goal? And once you've got there, is it achievable? Is it relevant? If my goal is I want to be a professional netball player and I'm currently trying to get better at basketball, like
it's not
and what's the time limit? Because goals, especially when you're having a bit of a rubbish time, it can be really hard to stay motivated. You need to adjust that time. And I guess the other way of looking at goals in sports psychology is, are they outcome focused or process focused? If the goal is win the competition, okay.
Not a lot of room for anything in between.
No. If the goal is that you want to be seeing consistent improvement on a specific bit of equipment, or seeing consistent improvements in timing, especially in early morning competitions, because you seem to have noticed that that's a bit of a trend of when you're not doing very well. Well, great. I can adjust my training so it's earlier in the morning. I can prioritize my training around that bit of equipment. I can video those bits specifically and dedicate a bit more time to it. I can go, do I want to see, milliseconds, hundredths of a seconds, tenths of a seconds worth of an improvement? When do I feel like it's improved enough?
Yeah, you got to get really specific, haven't you?
Yeah, it keeps you on track. I think it keeps you going, and you've got to reward yourself a bit at the end as well. You know,
exactly. Yeah. Otherwise, you're just going to get fed up, aren't you? And probably either give up or, like you said earlier, burn out. You need to avoid that. Make it fun.
I'm assuming most people give the dog a treat when they've done well.
Oh, all the time.
Not done well. So give yourself a little treat.
Yeah, that's so true. So, what makes a winning attitude, in your opinion?
Somebody that doesn't hang everything on winning, I think.
Yes, yeah. And I feel like a lot of people think it'd be the opposite, like a winning attitude, but no, it's actually not all about the winning.
No, because again, so much of sport is about the community, and I'm sure most people can think of at least one person that they don't like to be around on competition days.
Oh yes,
they're almost too competition focused.
Yeah.
That person's going to have, a much worse experience in that sport and struggle when things go wrong.
Yeah.
A lot more than somebody that's built that security and built that community around them.
Yeah.
Your dog, do you think your dog knows when you've won? Does it know what winning means?
So yeah, that's true.
Yeah, but your dog does well when it's having fun
Mm,
and it feels respected and listened to and heard, and it's not being overworked. And at the end of the day, right, dogs don't drive themselves to competitions. You're
yeah,
driving them.
yeah.
So if
They're
you're
not
not
choosing
having
it.
fun, yeah, if you're not having fun and you're choosing this and you're choosing
Yeah,
to
it makes no
spend
sense.
your time doing this and put your money into this and your families to sort of, oh, well, you're going to be away at the weekend again, aren't you? So, you orientate your life around it. You've got to really want it. And
Mm,
winning isn't everything,
mm,
because if you're only focused on wanting to win, then most of the time you're going to be disappointed. That is the
yeah,
law of averages.
yeah,
Only one person is going to win. Everybody else could go home disappointed, or they could go home having had a really great day doing the sport that they love with their best mate, their
yeah,
dog, you know?
yeah. There's always more than one way to look at it, isn't there?
Yeah. And focusing on that relationship that you have with your dog, or, in another sport, with your equipment, with your teammate, with
Mm,
yourself, whatever that relationship is, tuning into it is probably what's really going to help.
yeah. Again, taking it back to your why, I suppose, isn't it?
Yeah.
So similarly then, how do you stop yourself from dwelling on quote unquote failure and move on from it with a positive attitude, which is especially, like I said, important when you've got multiple events on the same day, for example, and sometimes
Mm.
with not very long in between them either.
I'd be really curious about what the function of dwelling is, because all
Mm,
behavior has a function,
yeah.
right? Are you dwelling because you feel like you've not really had time to properly review and make adjustments, and so you're just
Mm,
sort of stuck there? Or is it because actually it's almost a bit of avoidance? I'm actually quite nervous about the new thing that's coming up, so I'm just going to keep thinking about the thing that I've
yeah,
just done
true.
there.
Mm,
It's a bit of procrastination. Is it because you're actually just having a bit of your confidence has been shook? You're having a bit of a, floor drops out from underneath you moment, because dwelling and avoidance, I think, are two sides of the same coin, right? They both inhibit forwards movement. Whether
mm,
you're stuck in the past or you're avoiding thinking about the future, they're both stopping you from making any movement.
mm,
So aiming for acceptance and aiming for neutrality in those moments, I think, is really, really critical.
yeah.
Positivity can feel toxic when it feels
Or forced.
disingenuous. Yeah,
Yeah.
forced. Yeah, it's okay to grieve a loss if that loss was
Mm,
important to you. Um, and I guess, to pull on some like really core psychological concepts, we talk a lot about resilience in sport,
yeah.
the ability to bounce back from failures, pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and carry on. In my current line of work, where I'm not working as much in sport anymore, but I'm working in the NHS, and I'm often working with people that are very, very traumatized. And whilst I'm not saying that losing a competition is a trauma, for some people, it can feel like that.
Yeah. In the moment. Yeah.
In the moment, we can experience something called post-traumatic growth, and where that differs from resilience is about bouncing back and sort of getting back to where you were.
Yeah.
Post-traumatic growth is something so life-shattering and earth-changing that it can give you a new outlook on life. So you don't
Mm,
just go back to where you were, but your functioning improves from where it was before the
mm,
trauma.
I
And
see.
that's
Okay.
possible for people that have been through the worst experiences that humanity can go through.
Mm,
So if it can happen there, sometimes your biggest losses shake up why you got into the sport in the first place.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
then you
True.
go, I've got to do something differently. This isn't sustainable if I carry on like this. And then you go into it with a whole new head,
Yeah. And it
and
improves from there.
it improves from there.
Mm, that's very true. I feel like a lot of people just, they either get angry or, just irrational in the moment and they just don't even try to think of it in a positive light, I think. So again,
Yeah,
being kind of just understanding what's going on and just trying your best to think almost like
completely.
not even positively, just neutrally.
And it's, if people will respond in the way that they're going to respond. Like I remember going to competitions and watching somebody ski into like third place or something, and they'd like snap their sticks
Oh
and they'd
wow,
be
okay, they weren't happy with that.
screaming.
Yeah.
I was like, "You're on the podium, son.
Yeah, he's
Like
still
I'm
done well.
just trying to get in the top half here." But then for that person, third was failure. For
Yeah.
me, third would have been incredible. So
Yeah.
your
It's defining
perspective is your
failure again.
own. Yeah, right.
Mm.
But that person that wasn't happy with third place couldn't take anything positive from that day.
Yeah.
I
Mm.
might not have been on the podium in that competition, but I might have skied a PB.
Yeah. Yeah,
I'm
it's
going to take
relative,
more
yeah.
from that. Yeah, it's all relative.
You're competing against yourself, really.
Yeah.
So, for example, that the person that came third and was not happy about it, do you think it is possible for pessimists or those with a negative mindset to excel in sport? So, again, I don't know if you believe in that. Some people are just born pessimists, some are born optimists. I don't know whether you think that's a thing or whether.
Oh, I'm definitely, ever since I was a kid, I remember being like, I don't understand how anybody can think a glass is half full. Why would you only fill a glass halfway up? Clearly, somebody's come in, drunk half of your juice, and then they've only left you half.
Yeah,
I'm a
that's a
natural
bad thing.
pessimist. I'm a natural pessimist.
Hmm.
And I think that that's okay when it's in a healthy amount. So for me, the sort of worst case scenario planning has been something that I personally have always found really helpful
Mm.
because I like to be as prepared as I can be. And naturally, I'm drawn to a bit of what if this goes wrong and what if this goes wrong. But
Mm.
that's my way of familiarizing myself, right?
Hmm.
Um, I think that like on paper, yes, a pessimist or somebody with a negative mindset can excel in sport. But it's about, for me, the function of that pessimism. So my pessimism comes from my early life experiences, which led me to be a slightly contradictory person that can be quite cautious and also very risk taking.
Mm.
Okay. And that's what I needed in that sport. I needed
Yeah.
to take risks, but also not break both of my legs.
Yeah.
But do something where I could break both of my legs, but have thought
Yeah.
it through beforehand,
It's a fine line.
It's a fine line. And that's kind of, all extreme sports, really. I think most of us are sort of in that.
Yeah,
You're
there's always
throwing
that
yourself down a
possibility.
hill, yeah, if 60 miles an hour, wearing a helmet and hitting something very hard with your head if it goes wrong.
Yes.
I think though in so like agility, if you're most motivated to perform by criticism, then
Mm.
I would assume that you're motivated to prove somebody wrong, whether that's other people saying you can't do it or yourself saying you can't do it. So in
Yeah.
some ways, you're motivated by spite, right?
Yeah.
And spite is a powerful motivator in the short term.
Hmm. Not
We've
sustainable.
all wanted to sort of, give somebody the middle finger and be like, I'm going to do this and that and the other,
Yeah.
but it doesn't keep you warm at night.
No,
It
doesn't
doesn't
keep
get
going.
you up in the morning for those like early morning cold training sessions. And certainly you would not train your dog through spite.
Yeah,
You
exactly. Yeah.
wouldn't.
No.
So if you rely on that, you're most likely going to struggle with burnout a lot quicker and
Mm.
you're gonna really find failure impossible to understand, let alone sort of move
Yeah.
on from. And I think, to be honest, in any kind of team-based sport, whether your teammate is your dog, your horse, a human, your stinky negative attitude is going to rub off on them
Yeah. Yeah. All the time.
all the time. And maybe they don't want to work like that. Maybe they don't want to be powered by spite. And maybe now you've got a
Mm.
teammate who just doesn't want to work with you.
Yeah, exactly. It's always a possibility, and you never want to get to that point.
Yeah.
I think also as well, can pessimism sometimes be a coping mechanism of kind of keep your expectations low, think of the worst thing, so that it's kind of not an excuse, but you kind of come out thinking, I knew that was going to happen, or I said that was going to happen, or I expected that to happen. I'm not disappointed because I expected it. And then if it goes really well, it's almost like a bonus in a way.
Yeah, and that's where I think you're walking a fine line towards apathy because actually, if you don't really care that much, why are you paying to do it? Why
Yeah.
are you putting yourself through this? Why are you putting your dog through this? Your
Yeah.
dog could be outside sniffing every bush it wants to, having a
Have a great
lovely
time.
time. running through fields, and you've got it
not.
out here training.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
you do care.
Yeah, no, that's so true. So can a pessimist then train themselves to adopt a different outlook on sport? So essentially, can a pessimist, mentally train themselves to be an optimist?
I think that mindsets can shift for sure, but I would say I'm sort of a natural pessimist who knows how to sort of lean into or flex my optimistic muscle. So I haven't fundamentally changed the core of who I am, in the same way that if I broke my right arm once and I have to learn to write with my left hand. Do I do it as well as I write with my right hand? No. But did it get me through what I needed to do at that point in time? Yes.
Yeah,
Some people
same with
do that and
mindset.
they're completely ambidextrous, you know? I think though that like trying to push yourself from one extreme to the other with anything is a bit of an impossible task. And even this idea of like, oh, I'm only pessimistic or I'm only optimistic, most of us bounce between the two.
Yeah.
Really, most of us should be aiming for a bit of neutrality anyway, because if you believe your own hype all the time, you're going to struggle with failure just as much as if you believe you're never going to do anything right.
Yeah. So they're both just as harmful, really, in the
They
extreme.
can be, yeah,
Again, it's
in the
extremes of
extremes.
anything, isn't it? And never good.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. So last question then. Do you think there is any such thing as too competitive when it comes to sport? And I am a very competitive person. I always have been, to the point where my parents had to stop playing board games with me when I was about 5 because I would just throw a tantrum. And now I do it all the time out of choice. So do you reckon, can you be too competitive?
I think you absolutely can be too competitive. And I
Yes,
think
I
that's
agree.
because even in an individual sport, right, you're not just doing it in a cave on your own. You're surrounded by everybody else. And it goes
Yeah.
back to that thing again of we all know that one competitor who, when they don't do well, you're kind of a little bit happy about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's a word for that in German. It's called Schadenfreude, and it means taking delight in other people's downfall.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's a whole sentence in English, but in German we just have one word for it. And I have
Keep it
definitely
simple.
experienced Schadenfreude at overly competitive competitors.
Yes. Yeah.
'Cause, all the rest of us are here, and I think crucially in a team-based sport, as I said, whether your teammate's a dog, a horse, or a human, or anything else, they really don't need you to be bringing all of your crap into their world.
Yes.
If your dog's wanting to do this because your dog loves you and they want to
Mm.
please you and they want to get it right for you.
Yeah.
And if you're only focused on that outcome, you're not doing it for you and your teammate.
Yeah, you're doing it for the wrong reasons.
Yeah.
And like you said, it is lots of money, lots of time, lots of investment. So, why you got to do that for at least a good outcome in, not outcome as in winning, but outcome as in how you feel about it. It's got to be worthwhile in that sense.
It's a huge, huge, huge commitment. And I always think, we can be really harsh on ourselves and we can really take ourselves a bit too seriously sometimes. But when it comes down to it, like, ask yourself a really simple question. If it was, your birthday and your friends have thrown you a party and your best mate or your parent or your partner, whoever it is, someone that's important to you, gets up and they read a speech that they've written about you. What do you want that person to say? Because it's probably not they were so competitive
and they won so many competitions.
Yeah, it's probably all of the other wonderful qualities that make you you. And yes, some of that may be the things that you've achieved, but most people talk more about how they achieved it rather than what they achieved. And those are those qualities, those values, those things that are important to you. And yes, success and ambition and competitiveness can all be really, really important values to have in the world of competitive sport. But at the same time, sport is a part of your life.
Yeah, not your whole life.
Not your whole life. And sport is definitely only a part of your dog's life.
Oh,
Not their whole
massively.
life.
Yeah, our dogs would be totally fine if they didn't have to compete.
Yeah, And I do think it's really, really important then to like always have that stuff in check. So I'm sure that most, I guess, like competitive animals, whether it's a dog, whether it's a horse, whatever, benefit psychologically from their whole life not revolving around training. You know,
Oh,
taking your
100%.
dog out for just an exploratory walk where they can sniff what they want and they can play what they want, and they
Let them be a dog.
let them be a dog. And if you know that that's important for your dog, that's got to be important for you too.
Yeah, exactly. I think people focus so much on the dog and stuff that they just forget about themselves and, like, you know, being nice to themselves and doing all the right things in that sense. So yeah, everyone needs to remember that.
I agree.
Well, that is all the questions. Thank you very much again. That was amazing.
Oh, no, you're very welcome. Thank you for having me on.
So that was my episode with Laura. Like I said, I absolutely loved that conversation. Thank you again to Laura for coming on and joining me on the podcast today. It was so much fun. And yeah, if you have any questions, I'm sure Laura would love to answer them. Just get in touch with me or Laura on Instagram or any of the other social medias. And yeah, and follow me on all of the social medias, which is at Pause in Pursuit on pretty much everything, especially Instagram. Give the podcast a rating or review on Spotify and Apple Podcasts if you are feeling generous. Make sure to follow along so you don't miss an episode. Episodes go live every Wednesday, 8 p.m, as most of you probably know by now. Like I said, please do inquire about online coaching. I would love to help you guys reach your goals. And that is pretty much it from me this week, guys. Send healing thoughts to my foot, and I will speak to you all next Wednesday. Bye, guys.